was listening to a podcast yesterday of a guy that I follow here in Atlanta. Great podcast.
Yeah.
And his guest was talking about this idea of everybody leads in an organization, whether
Yep.
you're in a leadership role or not. Everyone plays a role.
Yep.
You know, whether they lead themselves, whether they're a leader of self or a leader of a small team or leader of a function or anything like that. I would extend that to everybody sells. You know, everybody sells in services in their organization, regardless of whether you're in a manufacturing business or a services business or retail establishment. Everybody leads, everybody sells and serves. And so when we go about it with a mentality of, I go to work every day to serve somebody or something, whether it's a customer, a client. If I'm a part of a nonprofit, I'm serving the mission. I'm serving, you know, if I work for a church or a place of worship, then I'm serving that particular place. And I'm also responsible for leading myself through disciplined behaviors, through contribution, through self-awareness, through depending on what level they are, perhaps that's executive presence. You know, I'm just responsible for showing that side of me in being a leader.
Yeah. That makes me think of another question just with your history and experience in recruitment. How do you pick up during either the interview or just those first interactions to know that you're talking with someone that's going to take that servant leadership approach to the company?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it is, this one really requires some level of questioning for a candidate to be able to have them talk about failure, have them talk about adversity, have them talk about situations that are uncomfortable. I mean, you know, oftentimes when we're interviewing for a job, we tend to be very half glass, you know, glass full, glass half full people, or we tend to focus only on the positives. And then when somebody asks about, you know, tell me something that you struggle with or that you're weak in. Well, I work too hard. Well, that's nonsense. Complete nonsense when you answer it that way, because it doesn't really show a level of humility. But you know, versus
we think it does.
Let me tell you about a time where I just completely messed something up, and this is what happened, and this is how I bounced back from it. I mean, that answer, perhaps even phrased that way, shows two things. It shows humility, but it also shows resilience. We're hearing this term so much from CEOs right now, not just about business resilience, but how are our people demonstrating resilience in their job? I mean, this has not been an easy 36 months for us.
For any of us.
So this month, February 1st, we are at this, 3-year mark of when the pandemic, within a week of today, is when the whole world shut down 3 years ago. And it forced us to be personally resilient, but it also forced us to be professionally resilient. And so listening out for that and having, again, I know we've beat it up a little bit today, but back to your original comment about self-awareness, people that possess self-awareness usually will interview well because they're able to share their struggle in a very appropriate way, without shooting themselves in the foot for that job interview.
Right. Well, I think it's worth repeating to Ash, because this is, if you're listening and you haven't done that self-work to figure out what your skills are, how you provide what you really want, can you work from home, or do you need to inspire yourself to go into the office every now and then? If you haven't done that at this point, it's time to get going.
It is, and what I like about really this idea of coming back into the office, and again, you can do this remotely, but there's definitely a distinct advantage of how you are showing up to others. I mean, we lived in the world for 3 years of Zoom calls and Teams calls and there was just something sterile about that, that didn't allow for reading the room. It didn't allow for reading body language and that. And again, some people are better at it than others, and they probably showed up okay,
Yeah.
or if not good, online. But there's no substitute for what we're doing here. There really isn't.
Absolutely.
And I push. I was on a call yesterday with a potential client, and we were just talking about this idea of building social capital and building relational capital. That's hard to do remotely.
Yep.
It just
You're right.
It's difficult. It's not impossible, but it's just hard. And I encourage people as best they can to build up the value of that relational currency through face-to-face, through live interaction. I mean, I kid with my older son, Will, about the idea of taking it out of text or taking it outside of the group chat or outside of the Discord server, because there's nuances to conversation and relationship building that are lost when you're having to read it in short bursts of 140 characters or less. I mean, there's just so much room sometimes for misinterpretation
100%.
or just not really getting the gist of what needs to be said with that. So just pushing on this idea of how do we get better at that? Because ultimately, we talk about this connection between relationships and results. Results are generated by people. And when there's an emphasis and there's an intentionality around developing better and stronger relationships, good results are going to come. They just are.